point. And so it's a way of finding out what their priorities are so that you can put together a bond proposal package that represents what their wants and their needs are. A good survey should give you what your community's perceptions are. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what I've been seeing in some of the polling I've done. When I started in 2001 doing this work for public entities and school districts enjoyed a relatively high job performance rating. Over the years, because of a lack of trust in government, that number has dropped. And the average, instead of being 60%, is in the 50 to 53% range. So keep in mind that while people do generally view school districts positively, there is a little more suspicion and there's a little less trust. And that's why communication is so key. Community perceptions test your job performance, and there's a direct correlation between how a community perceives the job performance of its district and its ability to pass bond. It also tells you if there is a lack of knowledge, and I've seen this a lot lately, especially because, again, we are talking to older voters because they're the ones who are engaged. We are surveying older voters and frequent voters. They don't know what the physical condition of your school buildings are because they're not in there, and they're not being told. You're not communicating with them. It also will tell you whether or not there's a positive or negative perception about how you're managing money. It will give you voter detail, probably more detail than you want to know, but it will break it out by age group. It will break it out by geographic area, kind of like what Julianne was saying with your precinct mapping. Another survey should also tell you, first of all, let me just preface this where, depending on where you are in the process. So if you are early in the process and you haven't made a decision about what kind of, your board doesn't know what to put on the ballot. You've got $500 million in projects and you only have capacity for $200 million. You can do a survey that will just simply test priorities with costs, not necessarily cost per thousand, but with the cost of that priority, and it will come back to you in priority order, so you can at least put a package together that represents the community's priorities, and then you can go out for a second survey that actually tests the proposal itself along with messages. So a good survey should have a non-biased, what I refer to as a who's ahead question. That question should outline what the bond is going to pay for, the total cost of the bond, and then the cost of the bond to the taxpayers. And every single message question after that is measured against that who's ahead non-biased question. It's a straight up question, no bias involved. And so anyway, that's what a survey should have. Message testing should only test one piece of information to determine how it impacts support. So if, let's say, you put safety and security with quality of education in one question, you don't know what's really driving the response. You don't know if it's safety or security or whether it's quality of education. So it's very important to kind of separate it out, and you need to really pull it apart. Also test priorities. Again, they come back to you in priority order. Your messages come back to you in descending order of those messages that move people the furthest in favor and those that move people in the opposite direction. You cannot be afraid to ask the hard questions. You need to know how, if there's a potential opposition campaign, you need to know how that's going to impact your support. If there's going to be competing measures, or if you want to test multiple measures, let's say I don't recommend more than 2 on one survey, but if you want to test a larger number and a smaller number, we can do an if you had to choose type of question. We'll ask 2 particular who's aheads to get you some sense of how people are voting on each of the measures individually, but then we will put them together so that you can see responses individually, so you can see if the larger or the smaller measure is going to be more widely supported. And then an agree-disagree series, which gives you purposefully prejudicial statements. It tests the veracity of the messages that came before. One of the things that I hear when we're designing surveys is there's so much repetition. Well, the repetition is there for a purpose. It's there to cross-check and make sure that the message is solid. And it also tells you whether or not you need to do some further education to get people to buy into what you're telling them. Let's see. So, let's talk about what you believe are your districts. We're not going to talk about what you think the community believes, but let's talk about what you believe are your community, or what are your community's biggest school district facility priorities?
Smaller class size. Number one, hands down.
Neighborhood schools.
What?
Neighborhood schools.
More electives.
Safety. Safety.
Enrollment, old buildings.
Someone else. Security.
Enrollment,
Oh, graduation.
technology.
CTE.
All right. So what kind of messages do you think are going to increase support for your bond measure? Do you know?
Energy efficiency.
Oops.
Opportunities for our children.
What?
Opportunities for our children.
Preparing students.
What's up?
Preparing students for the future.
So, I will tell you, safety and security, especially, it has always tested high, but because we have had these 2 school shootings in Oregon in the last few years, safety and security has definitely risen to the top. Protecting the community's investment, especially among your older voter groups, they understand because they've been homeowners, they get that things break, that HVAC systems need to be replaced, that roofs need to be replaced. So protecting the community's investment is always a very strong message that increases support. Energy efficiencies, it's not the energy efficiency so much as the cost savings. And in some districts, the cost savings is tens of thousands of dollars a year. And when you equate that to savings and operating costs that can then go back into other kinds of curriculum or programs, that is a very strong message. Vocational. We all have gotten stuck on CTE and STEM, but the average voter does not recognize those terms. Those acronyms mean nothing to them. What they do understand is vocational programs. They want to ensure that students are able to find a living wage job after they graduate. And what's really interesting and something new that I've seen in multiple school districts recently is that starting sooner, vocational programs in middle school are doing better than high school vocational programs, interestingly enough. They're polling higher. If there are cooperative ventures or partnerships between public entities, so if you're partnering with your Parks and Recs district or with your community center, those are the kinds of things that you should be talking about in your community anyway, But if you're going to partner, let's say, on a capital project, you should be talking about those partnerships, because people like to know that their community or their public entities are cooperative and they're trying to save them, the taxpayers' money. Those are all things that resonate very well. Technology is very big as well. People do understand that technology is needed, and it's access, equal access to technology, and making sure, again, tying that technology and its impact on vocational programs and preparing kids for the future. So how many of you have an active athletic advocacy group in your district? And they tell you that you are never going to pass your bond measure unless you put a new stadium in and a new track and field into your bond measure. But when we go out and we poll the community, in a recent survey that I did, 67% of respondents rated that as a low priority, and I think it was only like 18 or 19% that thought it was a high priority. That's pretty big. And when you get results that come back like that, it's something you need to take note of. Does that mean that you don't put it in there? Maybe. Does it mean that you talk about it? You have to talk about it and be honest about what's in your bond. Is it the number one thing that you talk about? Absolutely not. Every school district is individual. I recently did a survey for a school district up in Washington, and they told me that performing arts was going to pull really, really high. And both myself and the communications person I was working with said, oh no, that's not our experience. But guess what? We were wrong. Every community is different, and you can't assume anything. And so it's really, really important that you understand that you don't know what your community thinks until you go out and ask them and engage them. You need to be careful, especially again with older voter groups, about tearing down buildings that have sentimental value. If you can repurpose those buildings perhaps to serve seniors in some way, that might be an option. But maintaining a sentimental attachment to buildings that have historical value in your community is a big mistake. If it's an unreasonable cost, if the cost is too high, people are not going to buy in. Property purchase for future facilities, yes.
So we're running into a lot of problems with that particular issue, just because the cost of school construction is so astronomical compared to anything people have experienced.
Right.
And trying to match that what we're telling people it costs versus what they experience is something it's just something we're having a hard time overcoming.
I don't really have an answer for you on how to overcome that, except for what you really need to be talking about. And again, it's kind of what John was saying. When a guy is looking to have people invest in his business, he's not going to talk about the problems that are within his business and why he's asking for investors. He's going to talk about the great things that you're going to do together. You need to stick to the positive, and you need to talk about what it will do for your community. And if there's a way you can talk about how it will benefit the entire community, how it might impact the economy positively, those are the kinds of things that have traction and can work. You can't focus on those negative messages. You have to stick to the messages that are identified in your survey as working, and you can't get sidetracked from that. You have to stick to the messages. Again, lack of communication. You've got to be communicating with your community. Another thing that impacts support is a failure to recognize who your frequent voters are. And then the biggest thing is not listening to what your community tells you. I've worked with some school districts over the last 10 years, 15 years, that I went and I made a presentation to their board, and a board member said, you know what, I'm not going to base my decision on whether or not the community needs this proposal on a poll. And they lost miserably. It was a loud and clear message. Don't bother going out and asking, don't do a survey. I mean, I'm a survey researcher. I want you to do a survey. But don't bother doing a survey if you're not going to listen. You're not always going to hear what you want to hear. It's not always good news. But I will tell you that the information that you get back will be so valuable, and it will enable you to educate. It'll tell you where the gaps are in your communication. It will tell you what kind of messages you should be delivering. Maybe you wait. Maybe you don't go out when you thought you wanted to go out. Maybe you need more time to develop those messages and to convince your community that these projects are really necessary. So like I said before, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. And I cannot stress this enough. After the research is completed, you must repeat the same messages over and over and over again. And if the message has not been tested, do not use it. There is nothing can derail a campaign quicker than someone thinking they know what message is going to work with a particular group of people, and they go out and they deliver that message and it was the wrong message. A survey will tell you what messages are resonating. You should be talking to your community. If you alter your bond, let's say you go out and you ask about a specific bond proposal, and it comes back that there were some components within that proposal that were not popular, and you take those components out, you should be bragging and talking to your media that we surveyed our community, this is what you told us, and we responded to that. I already told you that surveys don't always deliver good news. You can't assume anything. Be prepared to go back to the drawing board. If it comes back and there's just no way and there's no how, you got to go back to the drawing board and kind of start over and do the additional education so the community understands what your needs are. And just because the results look promising, you have to pay attention to who your frequent voters are. And if you don't have their support, then passing a bond is going to be next to impossible. This is not in the right order. I want to talk to you a little bit about small school districts that aren't able to do a survey real quick. So L2 Political, which is the same group that provided these demographic profiles for you, they will sell you a phone list for your school district between $175 and $200. And you can specify if you want your list to be voters that voted in at least one out of the last 4 elections. If you're going out in a May election, you can do the last 4 May elections. If you're going out for a November election, you can go the last 4 November elections. If you're not sure, let's say you're going to go out in November, and if you fail, you're going to go back out in May, then I would recommend that you pull a sample of people that have voted in at least one of 4 elections that have voted in May and November elections. Your script, if you have volunteers do a survey or a question for you, a questionnaire, you want to make sure that you advise them that they have to stick to the script. They cannot introduce bias, because introducing bias changes your results. It gives you false positive results, and you don't want that. It needs to be very simple. You want them to have their phone list, and you want them to basically just write yes or no on the phone, directly on the phone list, and then you can tally results, because if you're a small district, you don't have a lot of people, it's a lot easier to do that. A sample script would be, hi, I'm so-and-so, the, Scappoose School District is considering a $5 million bond measure that would pay for X, Y, and Z. This proposal would cost property taxpayers blank per thousand of assessed value, or this proposal would not increase your existing current property tax rate of blank per thousand. Are you going to favor or oppose this proposal? So you want to tally support, and then after that, you're going to want to host coffees, visit senior centers, diners, other popular places the community gathers, offer tours of your school buildings that need improvement. They may look good on the outside, but the inside they may be falling apart. engage the newspaper to run stories on the bond and what it will pay for, and send out personalized direct mailings. For example, a parent telling a story about their kid. So, reaching older voters. First and most, yes?
You said too small. What's too small?
A couple of thousand is pretty small. That's a pretty small district. It's very labor intensive, and it's really difficult to get a valid sample, a valid survey sample. So you're better doing enumeration, which is basically you pull the all of your voters, all of your registered voters, and you buy your volunteers dinner, and you set up a phone bank, and you have them, maybe you have a local business that's willing to lend you their office space for the evening, and you have them all have the same script, and before you engage them or have them get started, you talk to them about the importance of, even if people have questions, you can tell that volunteers can say, I'll have someone get back to you, and then write a note on the script, but you don't deviate from the script. Say, I don't have those answers for you, but you want to train your volunteers to not be introduced bias. Yes?
How do I convince my committee that it's very difficult to get a valid sample with a small school district? They're convinced, and they've got a really complicated survey that they're ready to launch. Help me.
If they want to, I did do a survey for a very, very small school district recently, but it was a very short and brief survey. And if your school district is going to engage in a survey, it needs to be short. It needs to be to the point. Test those messages, maybe use even what I have here and test those really strong. If there's some components within there that match some of these strong messages that are resonating, and this is like a broad, this is, again, not every community is different, but just test a couple of messages and then leave it at that. But keep it short. That's the main thing, because you're going to lose people. For us, when we do a survey, if they don't complete the survey, it's invalid. They have to answer all of the questions.
When you said 2,000, you mean 2,000 registered voters?
Total registered voters. 2,000 registered voters, yes. That's a really small district. Again, I talked about communicating with your older voters. You should also be going to them. Send your choir to an active community or retirement center. Have your elementary kids make Thanksgiving cards for your community, your older voter community center. Offer senior passes. There's a school district that was, I think, in Ohio that offered their seniors passes that were issued free of charge to all seniors age 62 plus. And basically what it did is it gave them free admission to all extracurricular activities, including athletic events, concerts, plays, and musical performances. It's a way of getting people within your buildings. So there's lots of ways that you can engage seniors and get them in your schools. You can have them, you can host senior dinners at your school district or at your school. You can have them come in and read. Think about Mabel. She enjoyed reading to her grandkids. They can come in and they can read to kids in the library. They can help in the library. They can help with elementary math and reading skills in the classroom. They can be playground monitors. I talked to somebody today, I can't remember which school district it was from, but they have people who stand at the door. I think it was Ben Lapine, it was Julianne. They stand at the front doors and they greet students as they come to school. And they love it. And what it has done for them is what she heard, the feedback she's gotten from the seniors is, wow, these kids are really nice kids. They're not jerks like I thought they were. They can be cafeteria aides. They can give talks as experts in their field. So, for example, a retired news reporter came in and talked to the journalism class about what they, things that they should know about journalism and working for the newspaper. ask a veteran to come and talk to a history class about their war experiences. Some school districts have done a senior surf day where they invite seniors into the school's computer lab, and then they have high school students run a day of seminars to help them understand technology and surfing the net a little bit better. I mean, their seniors are much more educated than they used to be, but there's still a number of seniors that don't have a really good understanding. Reading buddies, I will tell you that in Newburgh School District in 1995, a retired teacher donated some land to Newburgh School District, and the Parks and Recs partnered with the district, and they built a school, and then they built, I think it was a community center, a senior community center. And part of that deal was the seniors came into the elementary school and ate lunch in the cafeteria, and the 4th grade students served lunch to those kids. And it's a melding of intergenerations, and it's an investment, and an engaged and invested person, regardless of their age, regardless of whether they have kids in school, are going to be more likely to say yes than a person who has no connection to your school. They're not engaged. They don't understand what's going on. Why are you asking me for money again? Oh my God, your buildings look great on the outside. What's wrong? I don't get it. So get people into your schools. You want to also, you should be engaging your Parks and Rec and your other and senior advocacy groups to find out what kind of volunteer opportunities. Do you know what seniors have that all of us lack? That's time.
Time. Lots
They've
of
got
time.
a lot of time. It's probably the only increased natural resource we have. So take advantage of it. They will get behind you. They want to believe in something. They want something to support. They want something to fill their time. Already went through that. Okay. This is so out of order. Well, if the bond passes, you want to keep communicating with your community. You want to be thanking voters. I don't know if any of you were in Julianne's her session earlier today, where she had that little sound bite of thank yous that came from small children, came from teachers, came from parents. It was really, really great. And if you haven't heard it, you definitely want to go and listen to her, or get on her PowerPoint and try to listen to that, because it's a great sound bite. You want to keep your community updated about how construction is going through your website, through newsletters, through newspaper articles, direct mailings. Julianne said that they do groundbreakings, invitations in the neighborhoods in which those schools are being built. So when, and when the school doors open, they invite the community to come in and see what they built. You want to keep them updated about how the bond proceeds are being spent, especially if the projects come in under budget. They want to know that you're spending their tax dollars wisely. And let the community know who your contractors are, especially if you're using local subcontractors, because that's a positive impact on the community. And one of the other things that Julianne said was talking about, when you talk about your bond measure, talk about how many jobs that bond is going to sustain with the new buildings. If you're needing additional class space, if you're going to be hiring additional teachers. So if your bond fails, determine what happened. Were there competing measures on the ballot that impacted support? Were you lost on the ballot? Were you somewhere in the middle where nobody could find you? You want to definitely be soliciting input as to why your bond measure failed. Was it too much money? Were there components that were included that should have been dropped? Was there unanimous support for the measure by the district staff and board members? I cannot stress to you enough the importance of having your staff on board. People listen to teachers. Teachers are very, very highly trusted, and they have contact with your parents all the time. And parents talk to grandparents, and parents talk to other community members, and word of mouth is extremely powerful. And in the smaller the district you are, the more powerful it can be. And, you know, there was back in a previous slide, I had the diner. Don't underestimate the power of the local diner. I'm going to go back to that real quick because I really like the quote. A note under the glass counter in one diner says, "The local diner is where you can hear about all the small town gossip." So a word of mouth is extremely powerful. Go back to the drawing board if you lose. Begin education campaign to help the community understand why the construction projects are needed. Consider a smaller proposal. Repeat the positive messages from the survey for those projects that are included in a smaller proposal. Use the communication tools that you had for the campaign. Find out where voters are getting their information, where there are components included that should have been dropped. Use the community perception and exit survey to build more positive perceptions in the community. And also, was there an opposition campaign? So engaged voters result in increased community investment in schools, increased positive perceptions in the district, increased ability to pass bonds in the future. And remember, you work for the community, and you owe it to them to seek their input, listen, and respond to what they tell you, even if it hurts. So, I'm going to leave you with this one question. Are you reaching out to Mabel, or are you waiting for Mabel to reach out to you? So, that's it. Yes?
Is it okay